What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? I'm a mixed-race Muslim, and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth.
The sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news bullshit.
Hello, Jace here. I hope you're doing well. As you guys are well aware, recently there have been a series of riots and violent protests in the UK after the violent attack at the dance studio. Today we're going to go over an interview that Piers Morgan had with Andrew Tate, discussing some of the remarks that Tate made and how they may have led to these events.
So an undocumented migrant decided to go into a Taylor Swift dance class today and stab 6 little girls. That's right, somebody arrived in the UK on a boat. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knows where he's from. The media is, of course, hiding the fact that this is a 17-year-old male. They don't want to highlight how ridiculous it is that we allow military-aged males, combatants, to flood our shores. I don't see any protests in the UK. I don't see anybody complaining. Nobody's outside of the school. Nobody's outside the police station. The soul of the Western man is so broken that when the invaders slaughter your daughters, you do absolutely fucking nothing.
Now that video has been viewed 15.1 million times. X limited the post's visibility because of its rules on hateful conduct. But the bottom line, Andrew, is that almost everything you said in that video was completely untrue. And yet it was apparently seized upon online, spread wide and far, and made people believe what you were saying. So my question for you off the top here is, why did you race to spread such woeful disinformation, given the massive following you have, and encourage people to take action against a caricature and description of who had perpetrated this, which was simply untrue?
Well, firstly, I'll start by saying I didn't know Nigel Farage said those things about me, which is a shame because I'm actually a fan of him. I think he's trying to do the right thing. I also understand in his political sphere, sometimes he has to hang other people out to dry to save himself because he's getting heat also. Secondly, I'll argue with you about the fact that everything I said was untrue. I think the only thing I said that was untrue is that perhaps he was undocumented. It was a 17-year-old male. It was a migrant. He did kill little girls. And advocating for people to stand outside and make it clear that they're unhappy with what happened is not a dangerous ideology. We live in a democracy where we have the right to protest and the right to make it clear when our voices are not heard. I recently protested against the Olympic ceremony outside the French embassy. I'm not sure if you saw it, complaining about how they depicted Jesus Christ, because I was unhappy with what I saw. And I think that when people feel like they have a voice, they're not likely to get violent. And the problem we have now is that people do not have a voice, which is why we're seeing rioting, which is why we're seeing looting, because people do not feel like there's a political solution any longer. And what I was trying to do is encourage people to stand up and make their voice heard in a peaceful way to avoid violence. Because when people feel like they're not heard, violence is always the end result.
Okay, so we can see kind of the tone this interview is going to take for the remainder of it. There is no arguing that Andrew Tate incorrectly stated that this person was an illegal immigrant, even though they were born in the UK. This next section is going to go. Piers is going to drill down more on the immigration portion of it.
Repeated the fact this kid who has obviously now been charged with very serious crimes, including killing these 3 girls, was a migrant. He wasn't a migrant. He was born in Wales. His parents were legal immigrants from Rwanda. So he's not a migrant. He's somebody born in Wales, born in the United Kingdom.
Well, first things first, it's unfair for you to say that I've had an opposite effect. What I did was point out the facts of the situation, that a 17-year-old male killed little girls. If I point out the facts of the situation, that the sky is blue, and then people go and decide to riot because I've said those things, does not mean those things are not true. That's the first thing. Secondly, here's where we have the dichotomy of the UK, and I actually think this conversation is going to be one of the most important and potent conversations of modern times, especially as this issue is not going to be solved anytime soon, Piers. The problem we have now in the UK is that we have a certain subsect of the population who believe because he was born in Cardiff, he is a Welsh man. And we have another subsect of the population who believe that even if he was born in Cardiff, he is not Welsh. I'm currently in Romania. I'm an American and British citizen. The woman who I have a child with is Italian. The child was born in Romania. The Romanians do not consider that child Romanian, not by their view of the world. If I had a child in China, they would not consider that kid Chinese. They would look at the face shape of the child and say that's not a Chinese child. If I had a black child in Russia, they would not consider that child Russian. In the West, in the democracies, we do. But we have a problem because you now have you have a dichotomy of ideas, you have two different camps, and the camp that believe that this person perhaps isn't even Welsh in the first place are also the camp which are being suppressed and not allowed to speak and are being smeared and labeled as far right for having genuine concerns. And that is why things are getting exasperated and out of control. What we need is conversation, and what we need is dialect. You cannot have a multicultural democracy and ignore the concerns of one particular subsect of that culture, especially when it's the native culture, and expect everything to be fine forever.
Okay, guys. So what you've got there is Tate's, he's doubling down. Instead of admitting that he made a mistake, he made a false claim. He's doubling down on it. He's stating that, okay, fine, maybe he wasn't, quote unquote, an immigrant. But if you look at many other countries or nations around the world, the fact that you were born in that country doesn't make you native. So was I really wrong? Because he wasn't a native to that country. Number one, in the West, that is not how we see things. And I think that's a strength. I think that's a benefit that we don't see things that way. That we are in UK and the US are very similar in that regard. That we are a melting pot, and that we embrace people from different cultures if they're willing to acclimate themselves into our country. I think that's a strength and part of what makes us great. But Tate's, he's covering his butt. He doesn't want to admit that he's wrong. But I will say that's an incredibly dangerous set of ideas to put out there. The one thing that all those countries that he brought up that don't consider you as part of their, you're not a Russian, if you're half black or whatever. Every nation that he mentioned there is an oppressive state. I don't want to be part of an oppressive state. The common denominator in all those examples is they tell their populace what to think. I'd rather be free thinking. But let's go ahead and get back into it.
Right, so here's my response to what you've just said. First of all Keir Starmer has said, as far as I can see, is that he is going to bring the full force of the law against people who committed acts of violence. And the violence that was perpetrated...
No, he called them far right.
Yeah, well, there were far-right thugs who were leading this, and they were attacking mosques. They were chanting anti-Muslim chants, and they were doing this because
there
was a
black person in the crowd. Would you say
you've
the
had
crowd
your
was
say.
black people?
I'm going to have my say now. It was put out falsely on social media that the person who did this was a Muslim. Not just a Muslim, but a Muslim who came in on one of the small boats, part of the very contentious, ongoing issue of the small boat. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying this is what was put out on social media in a series of false posts, which then went viral, right? So he was supposedly a Muslim. Not true. Supposedly came in on a small boat. Not true. Supposedly on an MI6 watch list as a potential terrorist. Not true. None of this was true. And so on the back of that, far-right thugs who led this went up and attacked mosques, and they went and attacked hotels with asylum seekers in there waiting to be processed, and they was trying to set fire to them. Those are acts of despicable violence which were being led by far-right thugs. Now, not everybody involved in all these protests is a far-right thug. Some of them will be ordinary members of the public trying to legitimately protest peacefully. I completely accept it. But the ones who were leading it, who were committing the acts of violence and making the threats against the Muslim community, were doing so because they have been completely misled about who had done this. It was not a Muslim. It was not an illegal immigrant. It was not somebody on the MI6 watch list. It was none of those things. Now, you posted on July the 30th, the day after the killing, and I feel particularly incensed, by the way, that the deaths of these 3 young girls have been hijacked in such a reprehensible manner to attack Muslims when a Muslim had nothing to do with it, right? You put this on July the 30th, you posted a picture saying, this is the man from Cardiff. We're looking at this picture now. That murdered the little girl straight off a boat, you said. Really? He wasn't straight off a boat, because this wasn't the person who perpetrated the crimes. You got 4.3 million views for this. And a community notes clarified, this is not the man that killed, attacked the children and adults in Southport. This image is of Kasonga Mabulu, who was arrested in Ireland in 2023 for a random knife attack at Dublin Airport. So again, 24 hours later, you're posting more.
Okay.
You're posting more. You're posting complete
apologies.
disinformation.
I'm sorry,
it's not okay.
sir.
It's not okay.
No,
It
Piers,
was not the man.
Did I get the wrong stabber? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, you did.
Piers Morgan, of
Yeah,
course.
you
I got
did.
the wrong
Yeah,
stabber.
you did.
And he certainly looked very Welsh to me. Let me make
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First things first, everyone on every side has got to stop pretending that this has anything to do with them three little girls. They don't have anything to do with this. Whenever riots and things like that happen during the BLM protest, during the Summer of Love, it had nothing to do with George Floyd. That had nothing to do with it. This has nothing to do with them three little girls. If there is an issue with people who oppose immigration or oppose Islam, let's meet it head on. Let's discuss what this is really about, because it is not about these three little girls. You've also got Tate. Once again, he put the wrong picture up, or he put a picture up of the wrong person. Doesn't admit that he was wrong. Doesn't accept that he made a mistake. He doubles down on it. Says, "Okay, sure, I might have got the wrong guy, but this guy was a stabber too, so it's kind of okay."
We played it.
Yeah.
The only thing I had incorrect was that he was undocumented. That's the only thing you could perhaps say he was incorrect. The London stabbing, Piers. The London bridge attack, he was born in Pakistan. We want to sit here and talk about how a large contingent of the people committing terror attacks in the UK and the most heinous crimes are not natively English people. And when we need to sit here and address this without being called racist, without being called far right, I'm a mixed race Muslim and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth. If we're not going to be able to point out the truth, what do you expect besides anger?
Well, I mean, the sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news bullshit is breathtaking, right?
Okay, so, and there you go. Piers got his clickbait in there. Accused Tate of fake news, which a little bit. But I want to throw in one more clip that happened during the interview, and then at the end of that, I'll kind of give my wrap up of the entire thing. But this is the dichotomy of Andrew Tate, because he'll spew nonsense. I mean, rapid fire. But every once in a while, he'll make a little bit of sense. And that's what keeps drawing people in. And he had a very brief moment of that during this interview. So I want to go ahead and play that for you.
That's his decision. He'll have to live with his conscience. I'm not here to tell him how to think. I'm also man enough to be understanding that not everybody has to like me all of the time for me to agree with some of the things they say. The biggest problem we have in the world today is everybody's so emotional. Everybody's so upset all the time that if somebody says something bad about them, they pretend that person's completely bad. Nobody is completely bad. Nobody is completely evil. Everybody loves their children. Everybody wants to live in peace. A lot of people talk about the idea of war, but let me promise you, Piers, I'm a person who's had a very varied life. When you see people with machetes outside your door threatening you and the police aren't answering the phone anymore, you don't want war. The Muslims want peace. The white natives of the UK, the Christians want peace. Everybody wants peace. But when you have a political class which refuse to listen to absolutely anybody, do whatever they want, grind everyone into poverty irregardless, then you're going to have some sort of uprising. And it's unfortunate that the poor people, and I call them poor, I mean the average person, is turning on the average person as opposed to turning on the rich elites who are just plundering the country.
Okay, so to wrap up, I got a few takeaways from this interview. I wanted to share with you guys, and y'all let me know in the comments what you thought, what you took away from it. First, people have got to stop taking what Andrew Tate says without verifying the truth for themselves. If Nigel Farage and some of these other leaders of this movement took what Tate and others like him said and accepted it whole cloth and then created this giant protest around it, then shame on them. You need to verify for yourself. Back to what Tate said on that last little clip I showed, he's not wrong on this one. The politicians are more than happy to let the population blame immigration for all of their problems. They would much rather that than for the people to be looking at the politicians themselves that are wasting money, that are lining their own pockets and those of their cronies, that are just doing a god awful job of governing their people, that don't have their best interests at heart. They don't want people to be looking at that. They've got to find somebody to blame. And they're more than happy to shift that to the immigrants. They're doing the same thing in America. Not that immigration isn't an issue in the UK and America, but it's not the core issue. The core issue are the politicians that are letting all of these things happen and looking for scapegoats to hide their own actions. In the UK, a vast majority of their immigrants are Muslim. That's a little different than it is here in the US. There, the majority of them are Muslim. So it only stands to reason that there's going to be an anti-Muslim sentiment in there as well. What I do think is ironic is Piers has been the loudest voice on the anti-immigration train in the UK. He's been railing against the immigration laws for years. Now he's going to act so affronted and upset that the people that he has been talking to got angry and are laying all of what's going on the altar of immigration. He's been stirring that pot for years. Now he's gonna absolve himself of all accountability and act like it's the far right's problem. It's Andrew Tate's problem. He's been spewing this nonsense too. Now I understand there are issues with immigration. I understand it's a little more difficult in the UK because as opposed to America, they do have much more finite resources, much more finite land. They can't handle this level of legal and illegal immigration. So it's a different situation than it is in the US. But he's been stoking this fire for years. And he's got to take some accountability for what's happened here. Now, with all that being said, I will say you've got a certain subset of any culture that are going to look for any opportunity they have to rob, to steal, to beat people up, to light stuff on fire. I think the overwhelming majority of these riots, and I mentioned earlier, we just got through with all that during the BLM protests. The vast majority of rioters are people that commit violent acts. It's got nothing to do with any fundamental principle. It's got to do with some people want to tear stuff up. Some people want to be violent. And they've got an opportunity in the mass chaos and in the mob to not only do it, but to do it and believe they can get away with it. So they're going to. And we can't negate that reality. We can't take that reality out of the equation in all of this. Most of the people in the UK that are doing these things, it's got nothing to do with Muslims. It's got nothing to do with immigrants. It's definitely got nothing to do with them 3 little girls or the guy that assaulted them. It's got to do with, hey, here's an opportunity to maybe score a little free stuff, light some stuff on fire, beat a couple people up, and walk away from it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we will see you for the next one. God bless.